Okay, hello and welcome to our municipal election hot topic panel. I'm Nicole Ferryanchek, the Deputy Editor of Digital at the Ottawa Citizen and Ottawa Sun, and I'll be hosting this conversation today. We're lucky to be here with three guests. We have John Willing, former City Hall reporter at the Citizen and Sun, and he's now the journalism professor at Algonquin College. We have Sarah Wright-Gilbert, the Citizen Transit Commissioner, and we have Kyle Humphrey, an accessible transit user and advocate. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right. So to kick things off, transportation is obviously an enormous topic. It's been one of the city's most pressing issues in the last term of council, as we all know, and it is shaping up to be an important issue for voters during this election cycle. Things like free fare transit are being discussed, the future of the LRT. So I'm just wondering if from each of your perspectives, you can tell us what you think the biggest problem is for Ottawa and our transportation system right now, and how the next municipal government could fix this. Does anyone want to go first?
Sure, I'll go, or John? Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. So when we talk about our transit system, the mind immediately goes to the LRT, but obviously our transit system is multimodal. An ideal transit system is convenient, reliable, efficient, and affordable. I don't think anybody can truthfully say that our transit system is any of those things to the degree that we would like them to be. For this next council, the challenge will be, I think, revamping our public transit system so that it works for everyone, that, maintaining fares at where they are and possibly offering lower fares to certain groups. And at the same time, improving the system, the entire system, bus and bus, including paratransit, obviously, and LRT, to be those things, be convenient, reliable, efficient, and affordable. Because you need people to take public transit for a myriad of reasons, but you cannot convince them to do that if they don't trust that they're going to get to their destination safely and on time and in a way that they can afford to do it.
Okay. How about you,
Yeah,
John?
no, I think Sarah's right about all those things. A lot of focus has been put on the LRT system ever since 2012, since we started contracting and starting to build the Confederation line. And I think more focus now has got to be put on the bus system that supports the LRT system. And as we keep building out the Confederation line, how are we going to build take a close look at those bus routes that support the LRT stations, and if they're going to the right places. I know some candidates have been talking about that during the campaign. So that's one thing. Look at the bus system now that we're building out LRT. And then, just bouncing off what Sarah said about affordability for the customer. We have a fare that's getting close to $4, the adult fare, $4 per ride. And, when we start nearing a metric or a price like that, I think it gives you pause for thought. You have to start thinking about what is the golden number that's forcing people off the buses and trains and choosing other modes of transportation. And we hope it's not cars, but I think obviously people are thinking about that. Just quickly, as someone actually who has relied on sustainable transportation and OC Transport for the past 10 years, my previous job at the newspaper, now I find myself as more of a car commuter going out to my new workplace and having breaking down the prices in my head about whether to pay for transit fares or buying parking every day. And so if those two things are competing with each other on almost a level playing field, then we've got a bit of an issue trying to move people from their cars onto transit. So it's not an easy question for any municipal government when it comes to making sure your fares are affordable for customers, because as most systems do, generally speaking, 50-50 revenue from property taxes and fares. The next council will be talking about this again, no doubt about it, about how much money should come from fare revenue versus property taxes. And I think personally, the conversation is going to have to involve the upper tier levels of government, start talking about transit operations, funding transit operations, because the City Hall can't make a big move on funding operations without help, I think, from the upper levels of government.
Sarah and John, they both touched on it. Um, Paratranspo is not an option for their users. Paratranspo is the only option. And for too long, the service has been neglected and would have still been the same way it was if not for a small group of people who stood up and said enough is enough. And that included Sarah, and has included Sarah for the longest time, and so many members of the media who have given us a voice. When it comes to accessible transit, um, there's not a lot of options, especially in the wintertime. And I mean, in Ottawa, we have 6 months of winter, um, and snowfall, and just the number of issues that have been ignored, whether that's no service between midnight and 6 a.m., whether that's um, high costs to use the bus. Personally, I pay $20 a day to get to and from work because I'm 4 kilometers outside of the UTA, the urban transit area. Um, Issues like that, issues like being able to book your bus based on drop off time. um, right now, I'm concerned about being able to get to work for 7 a.m. as I start a new job in the coming months, and wondering if I should give that opportunity up based on the fact that Paratranspo doesn't guarantee my time, and they say 2 hours in advance. Well, if I start at 7 a.m., that means I'd have to leave at 5, and maybe they get me there in half an hour. Great, but they don't offer those opportunities to book based on drop off time, to book based on real life opportunities.
This segues directly into my next question, which is how can we actually make paratranspo better?
Oh,
Uh, thematically, we're right on point. So, Kyle, if you want to keep talking, if not, we can pass it over to
yeah.
Sarah.
Okay, well, are we ready? I have a few ideas.
Okay.
So, first and foremost, we need a booking system and getting online bookings made it closer to what we need. And the application that has been spoken about several times will make it that much closer when that application comes to fruition, whenever that will be. um, the next issue absolutely is the booking times. I have to book the day before, and if I want to have a job in the newspaper, if I want to have a job in CTV, and when I was a kid, I wanted to be the next Max Keeping, and the issue was, well, Paratranspo doesn't allow you to get to events the same day, and that was an issue 20 years ago, and that's an issue today. So for the city to have left that alone is beyond me. Why do conventional transit users get the opportunity to take a bus right now, and I have to wait until tomorrow, and I have to book before 5 p.m. the day before? So there's no opportunity to say, hey, do you want to come to the game tomorrow night as we're watching the hockey game? Or, hey, can you fill in a shift tomorrow morning as I'm leaving? The newest commercial that OC Transpo launched has all the things you can do with the OC Transpo service. You can go to concerts, you can go to your friend's place, you can do all these things, and then they get to Paratranspo and they say running errands or something to that effect. It broke my heart to see that. It's just the stereotype that Paratranspo continues to perpetuate with their service is unacceptable, and that needed to change 20 years ago, and it needs to change now.
I agree with
Does anyone have?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I agree with Kyle. I think that it is absolutely reprehensible that we treat those who use paratranspo users who span the all ages, and we treat them like second class citizens. Like we're doing them a favor by offering them paratranspo service, even though they are customers who are paying for this service. My hope for the next council is that paratranspo is put on the same level, a higher level, better than it is now, the same level as conventional transit. And I agree with Kyle. The latest OC Transpo advertisements are disappointing for a myriad of reasons. But I agree that the insinuation that paratranspo is only being used by people to go run errands or go to their doctor's appointments. These people have lives. Just because you need to use paratranspo doesn't mean that you are a shut-in who just watches television all day. I think that we need to treat our paratranspo users a lot better. And the attitude needs to shift at OC Transpo immediately.
One thing that's
How about you?
Yeah, Nicole,
Yeah.
a great observation. Obviously, Kyle would have the best insight into para as a customer, so I can't even speak to what it's like to be a customer. But just as an observer of City Hall and the Transit Commission over the past, more than a decade, like it amazed me every time that paratransport didn't come up during a Transit Commission meeting. So the conventional service obviously was often talked about. The LRT system, of course, has drawn a lot of air. Bus reliability, but often, the paratransport wouldn't get any debate or discussion, or maybe it was assumed that one of the big issues was the booking system. So it was assumed there was no update, so there was nothing to be said about paratransport. I know the Transit Commission Commissioner Ray Gilbert, of course, can speak better to this, but has made it a standing item. I hope it still is on the Transit Commission meetings to have paratransport as a separate item, a separate discussion point, so that at least other transit commissioners and councillors can bring issues to the table and have a robust discussion and debate about it, rather than have a commission meeting go by without it being discussed. So I think incrementally there's some steps that City Council and the Transit Commission, before that the Transit Committee, have made. They address the quality of the buses. They've slowly, as Kyle alluded to, slowly tackled the booking system. But hopefully with this next term of council, they can make a leap into addressing some of these big issues that Kyle has talked about.
Well, to John's point about the separate agenda item, interestingly, with this council, Councillor Riley Brockington, who serves on the Transit Commission with me, he and I had to fight to get paratranspo as a separate agenda item. And when I say fight, I mean tooth and nail fight. We went the regular route, asking the chair to add this as, in an email, formal email, to add this as an agenda item, and he refused. And so we had to draft a motion and liaise with city staff and with advocates like Kyle and others, and I were messaging frequently on the issue, and we had to have a vote, an actual vote, to get this onto the agenda. I think that speaks volumes. I was embarrassed that we had to fight so hard to get a separate update. The reason that we were refused initially was like, well, it's part of the bus service. It's in agenda item number 1. You don't need a separate agenda item. Yes, we do, because as John said, the oxygen in the room was being taken up by LRT and then bus and then paratranspo.
Okay, thank you all for your thoughts on that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about affordability. People are talking about fare-free transit. I'm wondering how you guys feel about this, and can we really afford to further reduce fares when OC Transpo already has a $85 million deficit?
So fare-free transit has become an election issue. I'm not entirely sure why, because no one really was pitching it at the mayoral level. I think it's important to note that OC Transpo has an $85 million or thereabouts deficit from the fare box because they failed to create a budget for 2022 that was based upon reality. Their budget was based on fantasy, and that's being kind. Myself and others on Transit Commission raised these concerns when we looked at the budget, because they were projecting for 2022 90% ridership, or right around that number, by July. There was no reason to suspect that because of the pandemic and the remote work that anything was going to change, but they were really, really hopeful. They are now, unfortunately, suffering the consequences of creating a budget that was not based in reality whatsoever. When it comes to fare-free transit, I think that should be our goal, our long-term goal. That's not a short-term goal, because first and foremost, we need to improve the transit system that we have. We need to improve the service, the reliability, and the efficiency. We need to, because even if it's free, if you can't get to where you're going, you're likely not going to use public transit if you have a choice. And that's where I think that this discussion needs to be a two-pronged discussion about those like myself and John who have, I assume, who have a choice, who can take their vehicle if needed. And then those who, and it's a large number of people in the city, who don't have a choice, who rely on public transit to get to everywhere they need to go, take their kids to daycare, groceries, work, doctor's appointments, all of those things. So when we're looking at fares, I think that John's absolutely right. We need to look at other levels of government in order to help us with transit operations. But at the same time, we need to look at lowering fares for those who absolutely need it. So people who are on ODSP and Ontario Works, people who are in the low income brackets, further lowering those fares or even offering free transit for those individuals.
One thing that's not talked about at City Hall, and I know this is something Mayor Watson talked about, but there's a kernel of truth in what he says, is there's not a lot of people who talk about where to find savings at City Hall to try to, that could impact the annual tax increase. And so I do think that has to be top of mind for anyone at City Hall who wants to adjust the fare box ratio, the amount of revenue you're bringing from the fare box versus how much you're going to get from property taxes. But I do think there is a place to try out some no fare or free fare, or however you want to brand it, transit in the city. When we offered free fare transit over the past year, when there were problems with the LRT system and Transpo in the city decided to turn off the fare boxes, we rode the train as a family, and I saw other families on the train just having a great time. Taking the train downtown to the market, to the Rideau Center, and they just loved it. And I thought, wow, if we can make this affordable for families to take on a regular basis, how great would that be? So I've always wondered if there was a way to incrementally introduce some kind of free fare transit to the system, not every single day right away. That would be great if we could afford it, but on weekends at some points, special days, national holidays. I don't know, more national holidays. Election day, I don't know. It's something to at least try it out. It's an interesting marketing opportunity. Yes, it would cost some money to do, but I wonder if it's a great way to introduce the transit system to people, especially the LRT system.
Thank you, guys. Okay, we are going to move on to kind of a rapid fire question section. I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds for the next 3 questions. And this is specific to candidates for mayor and what they are proposing for the transit system. So Catherine McKenney is proposing that the city run its own maintenance service. Do we have the know-how within our own city to do that? Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, so within our city, we don't have the know-how at the moment within City Hall. But it's important to note that RTM and RTG are just general contractors. They didn't originally have the know-how either. They subcontract the know-how to Alstom and others. We're able to do that as well. We pay RTM, RTG $5 million a month, which is $60 million a year for maintenance. Why could we not take that money and to bring the maintenance in-house, which would then give us more control over the maintenance that's being done? Sorry.
You're done. You're out of time. John Willing, you're up.
I agree partially with Sarah. Yes, no, we don't have the know-how at Ottawa City Hall to be an LRT maintenance operation. We'd have to have a big learning curve to do that. The other thing, if people are concerned about the current maintenance regime right now, I can tell you that City Hall would probably hire everyone who's in the maintenance program right now from RTG and all the subcontractors, because we don't have rail workers in Ottawa. There would be a massive recruitment campaign across the world to try to find those workers, and we'd have to hire the maintenance workers that we have here in the city. So if the city of Ottawa wants to do that, it's a big overhaul to the maintenance kind of frame of mind at OC Transpo, but a big recruitment drive would be needed too.
Right. And Kyle, you're up.
You know what? Absolutely, Sarah. I definitely agree. John, I definitely agree. Just keep the money in house as much as we can. Quit paying for someone else to pay for something that we need. I mean, maybe that's a little bit civilian of me to say it that way, but um, I just think that we need to start going right to the source.
All right, you beat the buzzer. So you did win that question, Kyle. Okay, next up, Bob Shirelli is proposing a top to bottom review of OC Transpo if he's elected. Would that be worthwhile? Let's keep the same order. Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, good. I, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad idea. I would want to see more details about how he's proposing to do that. I do think that within any organization, it is always a good idea that every once in a while you do a review in terms of top to bottom of roles and departments and efficiencies that you can find. But I'm not sure that should be our first priority when it comes to the transit system. I think we need to really focus on making the transit system better for our customers.
Awesome. And John?
Yeah, sure. A review sounds great. It sounds like something that comes up every election go around. There's going to be a review of something, a review of some department. I mean, you got to ask, how much is a review going to cost? Are we going to ask our own auditor general to do it? Are we going to contract it out to a consultant? Is it a review to find savings? I mean, so there's a lot. There are more questions to ask when someone just says, "I want to review a department or a branch of the city," because it's going to probably cost some money too. And what do you hope your goals are coming out of such a review?
Exactly.
And Kyle?
I'm just looking for the review of Paratranspo. Accessible transit across the board, whether that's inclusive of paths to get from the sidewalk to a conventional bus stop, because OC Transport like talk about having accessible buses, but those are useless in the middle of winter. And Paratranspo, I mean, again, booking the day before isn't feasible for most people, let alone someone who might need to go to the doctors, let alone someone who all of the things that Paratranspo likes to talk about that they serve. Unfortunately, their service isn't right for any of those people. So, yes, absolutely, I think that it's necessary and they need to cover those topics.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. Mark Sutcliffe has called his approach balanced. He said he's not going to declare a war on cars or any mode of transportation. His plan is to add $100 million for better roads, to implement the recommendations from the LRT inquiry, and to modernize the OC Transpo schedule. Is that enough, Sarah?
I'm not entirely sure who Mark Sutcliffe thinks has declared a war on cars. I mean, he's the only one who's bringing up a war on cars. Although Sutcliffe's campaign is incredibly negative and slightly offensive in its approach. I think that, implementing the recommendations from the LRT inquiry, that's just good sense. So great. I think that investing $100 million in fixing our roads, I don't think he understands how much it costs to fix roads. Because road widening in the West End, from what I've heard, $160 million to widen the road. So $100 million sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. It's an empty promise. And I think that that's kind of indicative of what I've been hearing from the Sutcliffe campaign from the very beginning.
Thank you. John?
Well, road maintenance and road widening are two separate things. You're expanding a road versus fixing things on the existing road. So that's one thing. This idea of a war on cars, what Mark Sutcliffe is doing is try to get that suburban vote. They need that suburban vote to win this mayoral race. I'm not saying that there's no bike lanes in the suburban areas where people like to bike and use those amenities. Of course they do. But what Mark Sutcliffe is trying to do here is trying to talk to people who live outside the Greenbelt who perhaps might rely on cars a little bit more than people in the urban area. So actually, that's a narrative I'm going to be watching for over the next little under a month during the rest of the campaign.
Thank you. And Kyle?
Absolutely, it's a play to just. It's all votes. It's all people pleasing, and unfortunately, I'm part of the demographic that it's not going to please, or at least that amount of money isn't going to please. So I'm hoping that we can spend that money a little bit more wisely. And maybe he can take a look at his books when he's pass the election and figure out what he should do.
Okay, that concludes our firing line round. Thank you, guys. That was a very unscientific countdown by me, but I did my best. I have one final question to end the panel off today. I'm wondering if there was one question that you could put to candidates running for mayor that you could get their answer on. Maybe it's something that they haven't discussed, something in their campaign that has been confusing to you. What's the one question you would want candidates running for mayor to answer?
That's a really good question. There's so many questions I would have that if I could force them to answer. I think my main question would be, what is your absolute number one priority that you are going to run towards in the first 100 days of being mayor? I think what is the absolute priority would be my main question. I mean, there's campaign financing questions as well, but leave those aside and go with the priorities instead.
Okay, thank you. John?
I would ask candidates if they believe there are savings in the current City of Ottawa budget. $4 billion budget. I don't think we talk about this enough, because, and there are candidates who have worked inside City Hall for many, many years. And so they would know best actually where their departments may be deploying extra money to fund some really important priorities, whether it be climate change initiatives, public transit, homelessness initiatives. So I would ask candidates where they believe that there are savings inside the current municipal government that could help some more pressing priorities.
Good question.
And Kyle, what would you ask?
You know what? So it's actually along the lines of both of your questions. I would ask what they plan on cutting to get to the goal that they want to achieve, and try and go from there, because I find all too often there are things that aren't important to one person that are important to so many others who, unfortunately, are the silent ones, or the ones that get silenced. So I'd like to hear what their plans are for the funds that they cut.
Wonderful. Okay, well, that is going to wrap up our discussion on transit today. I want to thank John, Kyle, and Sarah so much for giving us the time today to speak with us and share your insights and your expertise. We really appreciate that. And thanks for watching, to you, the viewer. You can find all the latest municipal election coverage on our websites, and we would love to hear what you think about this panel or any other questions you have about the municipal election, which you can write in the comment section down below. Thanks so much, everyone, for being here.